What's up, you guys? Welcome to today's video. As you can tell, we are going to be on episode 3 of my Dark History of Prisons in This Country series. Episode 2 is on Patreon because YouTube did not allow me to post it here. But in today's episode, we're going to go to New Orleans in 2005. So you guessed it, we're going to be talking about Hurricane Katrina. Before, during, and after Katrina, we're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff, including corruption, riots, all kinds of stuff. If you guys are new here, hi, my name is Jess. I'm a person in long-term recovery who has in fact gone to prison. If you guys want to follow me on any other social media platform, TikTok, Instagram, Patreon, that's $2. It's only ever going to be $2. All of that is linked down below, as well as my vlog channel and my non-existent podcast these days. Don't even go to Spotify because there's no new episodes. Okay, let's kick this thing off. So for those of you that don't know, Hurricane Katrina was absolutely devastating. The loss of life was just insane here. It's something that we have never seen in this country. It was just absolutely horrific. Because of the way that officials handled Katrina, we have learned a lot about how to and how not to handle natural disasters like this. And this was just absolutely devastating. On August 29th, 2005, the mayor in New Orleans said that the inmates are going to stay exactly where they are. He said that on live TV. He said that they had 2 generators. There was no evacuation plan for the inmates, that they were fine.
Yes.
What about the prisoners in the jail right now? Will they just simply stay in the jail?
Sheriff?
Yeah, we have backup generators to accommodate any power loss. Excuse me, Governor. We have backup generators. We're fully staffed. We're under our emergency operations plan. So we're only, and we've been working with the police department. So we're going to keep our prisoners where they belong.
Bruh.
The first mistake was not having an evacuation plan. So now staff members don't know what they're supposed to do. Staff members are still there. And I know a lot of people are like, well, just don't break the law. This is a human rights issue when you have a massive hurricane headed towards you and you keep people there when everyone else was supposed to be evacuating. Not only were the inmates there, obviously, but the guards are there. The guards have to be there, right? To keep the inmates okay and make sure they have food and all of that stuff. Yeah, but I couldn't imagine where things would go wrong in a second. So Parish Prison was a massive facility. It housed about 7,000 inmates, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it was dead center in the middle of town. And not only did this facility hold people that had been convicted of murder and violent crimes, it also housed juveniles. It housed people that had not been sentenced yet. So this was a prison and a county jail and a juvenile detention center, all in one building. So this was home to about 7,000 inmates, ranging from 10 years old, all the way up to murderers. You know, I mean, it's just a huge range of people serving time here, and it's crazy. So as the storm came in, the first day, inmates would tell news reports later that they didn't know that the storm had hit because that facility was a very strong concrete structure, and they didn't hear the storm at first, which is crazy to think about because it's a freaking hurricane. But the inmates did not know that the storm had hit at first until the water started to come into the prison. So at first, the water was at their ankle and then their knees and then their chest. There were enough guards at first to move the inmates that were in water. Not long after, some of the inmates were moved to higher floors. The generators failed, and this left the inmates without electricity, without running water, for days on end. The officers left, but not before they locked the inmates into the cells. So this is what is absolutely just gut-wrenching to me, is that officers, they were taking the inmates to their cells. They had pepper spray, they had shotguns, and they were making inmates lock in their cell. They were packing inmates in these cells. So these are not large cells. If you've ever seen a jail cell, they're not very big, but they were putting a lot of inmates in 2-man cells, and then they locked the doors and then they walked away. At that point, the inmates were left to fend for themselves for the next 3 days. Now, let me explain something to you about a prison door. I know that like some movies, they have like keys or whatever. Most facilities have electric doors. So the door is closed from a control panel in a room called control or center of control, and they pop the doors by pressing a button. Well, guess what? The generators went out. These doors are locked shut. The inmates cannot get out. There is no running water. There is no food. There's no electricity. And they're in pitch blackness. Some of the inmates later said that they had to drink toilet water because it was the only water that they had available. The water that was in the prison and on the floor, that was sewer water, and it was not safe to drink. The inmates also did not have access to medicine, and there were diabetics there. I want you to think about what that would feel like for a second. You're in jail. You know there's a massive hurricane coming, and there's water all over the floor, and it's just getting higher and higher. You're moved to a higher floor, but the water is still coming, and now you're being told to lock into a cell. These officers have guns, they have pepper spray. You have to lock into the cell or you're going to be shot. You get in the cell, and then the officers just leave. 2 hours go by, 4 hours go by, 8 hours go by, no guard in sight, no food, no water. You're in complete blackness with people you probably haven't ever really talked to. You're scared, and you have to drink toilet water or wash your face with toilet water. It's the only water that you have left. That's all you have. You don't know when help is coming. You don't know if help is coming. 12 hours go by. Same thing. People are scared. They're screaming. They're banging on the doors. 24 hours go by. No help. Nothing. You're freaking out. You're scared. You're sweating your ass off because it is hot in New Orleans. It's very, very hot. You're pouring in sweat. You're dirty. You're hungry. Maybe you need medication that you're not going to get, and it just gets hotter and hotter and hotter. It starts to stink more and more with every single passing hour, and you think you're going to die. Once the storm dissipated and went away, deputies would bring their family to the jail. So they had like kind of hard to explain what this, not a rec yard, but they had like these outdoor areas by the jail. And basically a bunch of the deputies and all of their family members came to the jail after. Their house was probably underwater. They had nowhere to go. These are people that are now homeless. So they started to camp out there. Again, the deputies and their families, no food, no water, days on end. Civilians are suffering and struggling and dying. They drowned, or they weren't able to get out in time. There was no food and no water for them. So we have civilians dying and suffering and struggling and starving. We have inmates locked in. They can't get out. Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5 hurricane. It was so powerful, so devastating that it caused over 1,800 fatalities, and it cost over $125 billion in damages. That is how massive this hurricane was. So now 2-3 days have gone by. Inmates are freaking out. They are terrified. They're starting to smash out windows. They're starting fires. They're screaming. They're yelling. They're doing whatever they can to make as much noise as they can because they think that they've been left to die. Eventually, a couple of inmates break out a window and they start jumping out of the window only to be shot at by sheriff's deputies. The sheriff's department would go on to say that no one actually died from being shot after they jumped out the window. They were shot with beanbags or something. We're going to get into how unreliable that is in a second. So there is an entire riot going on in Parish Prison. There's fires, there's screaming, there's yelling, and the civilians that were right outside of the prison, they could hear the inmates moving throughout the facility. They could hear them getting closer and closer. Now, all of these people are afraid. I mean, they should be, because you don't know who is right behind one door keeping them away from these inmates. You don't know. As you hear them move throughout the prison, you don't know if they're trying to come for you. You don't know what they're going to do. You don't know if they can get out. And as I just mentioned, there was only one door at the end of this, stopping those inmates from getting out and running away or attacking the civilians that were on, in the same area. So that was very scary for the civilians. It was also very scary, obviously, for the inmates who thought that they were left to die. While the civilians outside with their families, their babies, their kids, aunts, uncles, they start to realize that the inmates are getting closer and closer, and all they had to arm themselves with was like one of them had a baton, one of them had a curling iron. They didn't have weapons. So say some of the inmates got out and they attacked them, what could they do about it? To play devil's advocate, I'm a huge advocate for inmates, but you do not want to encounter an inmate that has just escaped for any situation, for any reason. They're dangerous. And there are certainly people that I don't want to get out of prison that are dangerous criminals that could hurt you or your family. And this was a very dire, very stressed, very tense situation. Inmates thought that they were going to die. I mean, the civilians thought they were going to die. Everyone thought they were going to die. And that was a valid concern considering Katrina caused over 1,800 fatalities. We are at our all-time breaking point, right? Right inside of the prison. They could break out. Civilians are freaking out because they're right there with their families and their kids. They can't protect themselves. No one has food. No one has water. Everyone is freaking scared. And I know that on one side of the door, here are the inmates. The other side of the door, there are civilians. We're all human beings and they're all afraid. Everyone in this situation was very, very scared. The civilians were so scared, in fact, that some started to write their name and identification on their bodies just in case they died. Think about that for a second. Your home completely flooded, gutted. I mean, you cannot go there. It's not safe. You're sleeping outside of a prison with your babies. There's no food and there's no water. And you're starting to write down your identification on your body in case you die so that they know who you are. Isn't that horrible? Ugh, couldn't imagine. People started to get really sick because there was sewer water in the prison, but even outside of the prison, people were getting really sick from lack of medication, dehydration, heat stroke, trench foot, because people are, walking through all of this water and their feet were unable to remain dry. So they started to get trench foot, and just a laundry list of other things. So Gusman, the mayor, he knew he made a huge mistake by not having an evacuation plan because he not only risked a lot of lives, inmate lives, he risked the lives of his staff members and the deputies that ran the prison. Well, some of the deputies decided they were going to evacuate before the mayor could bring in reinforcements. So they started an evacuation plan on Tuesday. Well, the mayor called around and got the help of a sheriff from Angola, which is a couple of 100 miles away. And that sheriff was going to bring in a tactical team and buses and whatever they could to get the inmates from the parish prison to whatever facility they could. What's crazy is as the sheriff from Angola, hope I'm saying that right, drove through New Orleans, which wasn't easy because, power lines are down, there's debris everywhere. It was not easy to get through. Civilians were shooting at them because civilians were so desperate for food and water and resources and help. They were so desperate to get out of there that they were mad and justifiably so. So they were getting shot at, the tactical team, as they went in to try to get the inmates out. So the way that the inmates were evacuated is they were taken and they were put on this overpass that was also covered in water. But the deputies didn't know what else to do with them. So they're on this overpass. There's tons of water on it. They're in the New Orleans sun. And by the time the tactical team got there, there were over 1,200 inmates just unsecured on this overpass. And there were, some deputies around them with weapons. This evacuation took them 4 days. Get in, get all of the inmates out, and transfer them to different places and take them by bus. Gusman would go on to say that the evacuation was a victory.
A victory?
This same department would also go on to say that no lives were lost in the evacuation of Parish Prison. However, 517 inmates are officially unaccounted for. Just unaccounted for. So the inmates that made it out, they told anyone they could, in a lot of their testimonials, interviews, and things like that they were walking past floating bodies, dead bodies, face down in the prison, in the actual prison. And that would make sense considering we have 517 unaccounted for inmates. The evacuation was so thrown together and so rushed that they actually left inmates behind for 48 hours. And one deputy decided to just do a final walkthrough, and thankfully he did, because he found inmates that had been left there that literally were like, great, everyone's gone. They came to evac people, they forgot us, and now we're really dying. Just couldn't even imagine that. You finally get an evac team in there and you leave people behind, but Gusman says it's a victory. Cool, bro. I don't know if you understand the definition of that word. Gusman would also only be seen during the aftermath of Katrina shooting a re-election video with his videographers. So great guy. So these inmates were transferred to 42 different facilities all across the state. And it took a couple of lawyers, one criminal lawyer named Phyllis Mann, she started to go interview these inmates that were spread all across the state. And she was immediately met with, people that were confused, lost, scared, people that were sick, people that were like, just please get a hold of my mom. Their skin was peeling in a lot of cases. I mean, these people were literally left to die. Well, 6 months later, over half of these inmates still had not gone to court. Some of them didn't even know why they were there. In one of the interviews, one man said, well, I was arrested for a warrant, but no one can tell me what the warrant was. So when they moved all of these inmates to the 42 different facilities, all the records were gone. The prisons that took in all of these inmates from Parish, they had no records, no identification. They didn't know what level of inmate this was. And the inmates that were brought in to the 42 different facilities, most of them had to sleep on the rec yard outside, and they had bologna sandwiches while they had to watch GP, or general population, eat the regular food. And that was just because of a shortage. I mean, a prison that is only supposed to occupy, say, 2,000, well, now you bring 3,000 inmates in. Where do you put them? On the rec yard, in a sleeping bag, and you give them whatever food that you can. I mean, that is just how unprepared everyone was for this. That is how sloppy this was. This is just an absolute shit show, honestly. So one of the prisons that a lot of the inmates went to was Hunt Correctional, and that is where they were sleeping on the yard. And what's crazy is other inmates would go on to say that there were a lot of instances of crimes and rape and a lot of things going on that yard because they just could. There wasn't enough staff to oversee the 2,000 inmates that Hunt Correctional held originally, plus an influx of 3,000. So obviously more than doubled the inmate population, and there just wasn't enough deputies to look after everything. So there was a lot of really bad stuff happening while they were at Hunt Correctional Facility. Defense attorney Phyllis Mann would say that as she was going through all of these records and realizing that she had no idea why people are there, a lot of these people hadn't been to court. Most of these are petty crimes, but there's always one common thread to all of the cases that she saw, and it was that they were poor. There's a lot of different interviews from people that experienced this. A lot of them that they were found innocent and they weren't even guilty of any crimes. A lot of them were petty crimes like non-payment of fines. In my research, I heard a lot of people talking about the fact that you could just go to jail for 10 days for jaywalking in New Orleans. I mean, there was a lot of really eye-opening and really sad cases where people were going to jail for absolutely no reason. I mean, it's just crazy. I understand that like you just shouldn't have broken the law, but sometimes you're in a corrupt system and you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. Sometimes you are accused and you are innocent. And proving your innocence takes a really long time in this country. Most people that are arrested don't have the means to make bail. So bail reform is a big deal. It's very important. But if you don't have money to fight your case, a lot of times you are intimidated or pushed into signing a plea agreement. Well, now, why would you sign a plea agreement if you're not guilty? That is because while you're sitting in jail, even if it's just for 30 days, that doesn't sound like a lot of time, but that is just enough time to lose everything: your job, your apartment, your car probably got impounded, pets that you had in the house that someone had to go get or that were taken to a shelter. I mean, it's just enough time to have everything in your life completely fall apart. So people are desperate to get out of jail as fast as they can to get back on their feet. You could lose your student loans within 90 days. If you have kids and you're arrested, guess what? Now your kids are in the system and you might not even be guilty of a crime. I understand that local officials didn't really know what they were up against when facing Hurricane Katrina. I totally understand that. What I cannot understand is to not have an evacuation plan and then also risk the lives of your deputies, risk the lives of inmates. And then once you do that, once you have realized, oh my God, it's been days and these people are dying, I have to get them out, there's no real accountability here. There is article after article of officials saying, oh, there's no official death count. The official death count for Parish Prison is 0. There is absolutely no accountability. And there are local officials saying, you just shouldn't have broken the law. I mean, it's just a really gross way to look at it. This is a human rights issue. So the company Human Rights Watch, they were the ones to have the death count of Parish Prison be 517 because there is no official death count. So there is no accountability whatsoever. So like a decade and a half later, most of the prisons in New Orleans have been torn down, but Parish Prison stands, and it's typically a home for looters or people that want to tag or come through, or videographers that are interested in abandoned prisons in the country. What's crazy is while I was watching some of the footage of the inside of this prison, there was one room that was covered in family pictures. And that just broke my heart because I know hundreds of people died just in this instance alone. And The last thing that they were probably looking at were their families' faces and pictures of their loved ones. This really is an opportunity where we can look at our past, understand what we did wrong, and hope to not make the same mistakes in the future. I mean, hopefully, there is no more hurricanes, but there should always be an evacuation plan for staff, for the inmates, for people anywhere near facilities like that. When we're talking about natural disasters that could wipe out your whole city, there should always be a plan to get out everyone that you possibly can. And even though there's always going to be in a natural disaster, someone that is just like, I'm not going, try to get everyone else out that you can, to leave inmates in chest high water with no food and no electricity, no air, no medicine for days on end. It is absolutely horrific. And my heart breaks for the people that passed away and for the people that experienced that, because that leaves trauma that doesn't just go away. You don't think that you're going to die and spend days dying because if you don't have food and water, like, guess what, bro?
It is not looking good.
You don't go through that and come out the same. There's always going to be that trauma that just is there. You're different after an experience like that. All right, you guys, I'm going to leave the other two videos that I did on the history of prisons in the description box down below. One of them, again, is on Patreon. I'm sorry. If you like me doing these kinds of videos, let me know in the comment section down below. Subscribe if you have not done so already. But I'm going to end today's video here. As always, I love you guys. Stay safe, stay in recovery, whatever that looks like to you. Inmates are also human beings that don't deserve this, and also they have rights. I'll see you guys in my next one.